Justin Halley sat in the dark glider, his long legs cramped up almost to his chest, his seat belt buckled across his shoulder and lap, the parachute strapped to his back. He'd been sitting like this for many hours. The glider was completely sealed. His little cockpit let in no light. Halley had no idea what direction the mother plane had carried him. All he knew for certain was that, at some predetermined point, just before the jet came within radar range of outer heaven, the glider had been released. Soon it would lose enough altitude to come in low and escape enemy radar detection. Later, at some other preset time, the explosive bolts of the glider's cockpit cover would release, and Halley would parachute out and down into the unknown. From there, he'd be on his own. The sudden sound of the cockpit bolts exploding startled Halley, but the instant his eject seat hurled him out of the glider, every one of his senses was on red alert. The chute opened without effort, unfurled like a giant silken sail, and carried Solid Snake silently to Earth. He snapped the lines free and gathered the folds of the chute into a bundle he could carry. Now he looked around him, trying to see something, anything, but visibility was zero. Halley had landed in complete darkness, in the middle of what felt like and smelt like jungle. Trees and vines. Halley had landed in complete darkness, in the middle of what felt like and smelt like jungle. Trees and vines were all around him, and there was a heavy, warm mist rising from the jungle floor. Seeing anything at all was impossible. "Down and safe," he spoke into his compass, hoping that someone at Foxhound Command was online and was monitoring him. All around him, Halley heard the sounds of the jungle, of wild beasts, night stalkers, and killer animals. It was too dark to travel. He'd have to wait until dawn. Climbing up into a nearby tree, Halley disturbed a sleeping tribe of little red monkeys who scattered through the branches, angrily chattering. Justin wrapped the parachute around him and settled into the crotch of the tree to grab a few hours of uneasy sleep. He didn't know when he'd get the chance to rest again. 3 hours later, Halley awoke. Although the sun could barely pass through... 3 hours later, Halley awoke. Although the sun could barely pass through the thick jungle canopy, enough light penetrated to rouse Halley. All of his senses on red alert, he looked around him in every direction. Apart from the animal and bird sounds of early morning, there was nothing. Justin climbed down silently to the jungle floor and set out on his mission, the search for outer heaven. Some highly developed instinct, the result of his Snake Man training, led his feet west. He noticed that there were fewer birds and monkeys in that direction, and fewer animals always spells the dangerous presence of man. Animals were far from stupid. They could teach man a few tricks about survival in the hostile terrain. So west Halley went, keeping low and as quiet as possible. As he moved without sound through the jungle, Justin Halley found himself suddenly in a patch of jungle growth that was fouled by a strong, almost sickening odor. His nose wrinkled. Solid Snake recognized that smell. Panther musk. It might be a useful weapon. Rubbing himself against the jungle plants, Halley let this heavy, musky cat smell seep into his suit of camos. Now he smelled exactly like a jungle killer. Other animals would keep out of his way. Unless, of course, he should bump into another male panther. Then he'd be in the battle for his life. Solid Snake smiled at the thought of himself in a cat fight, although it would actually be no laughing matter if it really happened. At last, after 3 more miles of trudging through dense, dank vegetation, Justin Halley saw light ahead. That could only mean a clearing, a man-made clearing. Trees had been cut down around a huge circle, several miles wide, and the leafy canopy had a large hole in it. Sunlight poured down. Careful now. Halley crouched down and edged forward very slowly. On the edge of the clearing, he stopped. Bingo! 3 military trucks with a strange insignia painted on their sides were parked in the clearing, 2 of them close together, and the third one much further off. The insignia, a grinning, fanged reptile entwined around a twisted, broken tree, was something Halley didn't recognize, but it had a menacing quality that struck a familiar chord deep inside him. It told him that Metal Gear wasn't far away. Beyond the trucks, about half a mile away and surrounded by a high electrified fence, stood a vast compound of sealed-off buildings. They appeared to be made of cast concrete or heavy stone, and they had no visible windows. Solid Snake grinned. The satellite photos of Foxhound Command were on target. This massive and menacing compound must be outer heaven. Solid Snake sat back and spoke softly into his compass. I think I'm at the mission site. I have visual ID of potential target. Looks like outer heaven, guys. He waited for a minute, hoping for a reply. Maybe a beep of some kind to let him know that his home base had him on the computer screen. But there was no return transmission. Was the monitoring system working? Or had he been cut off from Foxhound Command? He'd have to locate a radio transceiver as soon as possible to find out. Justin stood up carefully, looking in every direction. As he did, the jungle silence was broken by a sudden ear-splitting chorus of snarls and growls. 6 barking killer dogs, giant half-starved Dobermans, burst out of one of the trucks. Their fangs were enormous, white and sharp. Their powerful jaws dripped foamy saliva. Snapping and howling, they raced toward Halley at top speed. In his training with the Snake Men squad, Justin had learned an entire language of commands to control killer dogs. He could get them to halt and to sit in German, Russian, Swahili, Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, and a dozen other tongues. But he had no idea in what country he was now, not even which continent. His canine vocabulary would be of no use for him. He had only seconds to spare. No way could Solid Snake outrun this pack of trained attack dogs. Without a weapon, he couldn't even defend himself. Even if he managed to snatch up a branch from the jungle floor and use it as a club, Halley was no match for half a dozen frenzied dogs who lived only to tear out an intruder's threat. Suddenly an idea struck him. It was a crazy idea, but it could be his only chance. Throwing himself to the ground, Halley raised himself on all fours like a giant cat, bracing himself as the dogs came closer. He could smell their hot, strong breath and see their insane, rolling eyes. Most of all, there were those sharp white fangs less than a foot from his face. Now the killer dogs had almost reached him. They were only inches away from chewing him into raw chunks of bloody flesh. Solid Snake arched his back high. He snarled and growled, low in his throat, meanwhile staring hard at the lead dog with narrowed, angry eyes. Drawing his upper lip back, Halley spat and yowled like a furious giant cat. Just as they heard Halley's unearthly sounds, the strong scent of the panther musk on his camouflage suit hit the dog's sensitive noses. Jungle predator! A male panther! Between these sounds and the smell, the Dobermans perceived Solid Snake as a big cat. 170 pounds of pure panther power, with incredibly strong teeth and claws, sharp enough to rip a dog into confetti. The Dobermans skidded to a halt, yelping, then turned tail and rushed away, almost knocking each other over in their eagerness to escape. Laughing under his breath, Justin Halley watched them go. Then Halley's expression turned serious. He had some heavy work to do. Crouching low, he slipped silently, almost invisibly, across the clearing to the nearest truck, about 50 yards away. He kept his eyes peeled for guards, but saw none. Empty. The truck stood empty. No guards, no dogs. On the seat in the truck's cab, a pair of powerful rubber-cased field binoculars had been left. Solid Snake's hands closed around them in triumph. The binoculars were the first piece of the equipment he'd need. Now he was on his way. Should he commandeer this truck? No. The third truck, parked furthest from him, was closest to the gate of outer heaven. That was the most useful one. By the time he'd made his way over there, he'd know if any of the trucks were guarded. The second truck was in fact guarded. Inside the cab, the uniformed guard, a muscular man with a heavy black mustache, was drowsing in the front seat. Halley came up from behind him without a sound. The man only turned in his sleep, snoring. 2 swift rabbit punches from Solid Snake's strong, quick fist, and the sleeping guard was out like a light on a one-way ticket to dreamland. 1 down. But was the sleeping guard alone? Guards almost always come in pairs. A sudden noise behind him made Halley turn. Another uniformed guard, tall and heavy, was leveling an automatic weapon at Solid Snake's stomach, growling something in a guttural language Halley didn't understand. But Justin could see the guard's finger tightening on the trigger. Lightning fast, Halley aimed a knee kick and connected. With a cry of pain, the big man went down, and an open-handed chop to his hairy neck finished him off for now. He lay still, not even twitching. Solid Snake looked around. The overpowering of the 2 guards had been so swift and silent that no alarm had been raised. Yet. But it could happen at any moment. Should he take the guard's Kalashnikov automatic weapon? No. Halley might encounter a metal detector on his way to the Outer Heaven compound. Better wait until I'm inside, he thought. But something else caught Justin Halley's eye. He knelt down at the side of the fallen guard. Attached to the big man's uniform by a pin was a plastic card, bearing that same strange insignia, and encoded with a series of raised symbols. Halley recognized it immediately as a key card that might activate at least one of the electronic doors and gates of the Metal Gear base. The fallen man must be an officer to be authorized to carry a key. This was a real piece of luck. Solid Snake pocketed the key card and moved rapidly toward the third truck. The third truck was empty and unguarded. It was parked fairly close to the gate of the base. Justin Halley got behind the wheel and put the truck into low gear. The vehicle moved slowly toward the entrance of the base. Driving with one hand and feeling around on the front seat with the other, Solid Snake found a package of half-eaten rations. Evidently, the men must have recently had their breakfast. Cautiously, he took a nibble, tasted it, and made a face. Government-issued fuel rations are the same all over the world, he thought. They may be packed densely and with the nutrition and vitamins, but they taste like a cross between cat food and an old rubber tire. Even so, he chewed the rations quickly and swallowed grimly. No telling when he'd get another meal, and this so-called food would at least give him a quick energy boost. Also on the seat was a pack of cigarettes. Halley reached for him, but drew his hand back. Could they be poisoned? Also on the seat was a pack of cigarettes. Halley reached for them, but drew his hand back. Could they be poisoned? His instincts told him that they could be a deadly trap. And even if the cigarettes contained no added poisons, they were deadly enough in themselves. He decided to leave them where they were. But he did take the matches. Matches could be used in many ways. The truck was at the gate now. Solid Snake slipped out of the driver's seat and crouched down, keeping the vehicle between him and the gate, while his quick eyes darted around, checking for guards. 2 armed men were patrolling, but they were overconfident, talking to each other in that same strange language. They didn't expect to see Hallie, so they didn't see Hallie. He had made himself into a shadow, as he'd been trained. Holding his breath, Solid Snake waited until they passed along to the far side of the electrified fence. Then Hallie duck-walked up to the gate, looking for the electronic lock. When he reached it, he stood up. This was it. Would the key card in his hand be the one that opened the locked gate? Or would the alarm go off, bringing guards running from all sides? Only one way to find out. Hallie pressed the embossed side of the card against the lock. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a click. The gate opened, and Hallie ran inside, swifter than a shadow, and just as invisible. I don't know if you're copying, but I'm in, he whispered into the homing device, the compass he'd been carrying. No radio, so no response. Once again, Justin wondered if anyone back at command could hear them. Maybe the compass was defective. Maybe the transmission channel was blocked or scrambled. Maybe... who knew? The possibilities for a mess-up were almost endless. What he didn't know was that although the compass was really just a compass, he was transmitting after all, through a hidden micro radio that had been sewn into his sleeve back at the base. He's in, Commander South announced, his eyes on the large computer screen. Heaven help him, whispered General West.